Hey guys, Adiutorium here, and in today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create the fourth puzzle mechanic idea, which is the sequence activation puzzle. And for those of you who already forgot how the mechanic looks like, it looks like this. So yeah, it's a really cool mechanic with a lot of potential. So without further ado, let's get into the tutorial. Okay, so the sequence activation mechanic is a really versatile mechanic. There are so many versions of it that you can make. But on this video, we are going to discuss about two most basic versions of the mechanic. So hopefully this way, you guys will be able to understand how the mechanic works, so that later on, you guys can experiment with it and comes up with different versions that fits your game. So the difference between these two versions is on the checking process. On the first version, the checking process will be done as the player attempts the sequence. This means that the sequence will have a clear start and will reset whenever the player enters the wrong sequence. This leads to an easier puzzle and more guessable sequence. This version is suitable if you want to create a sequence activation puzzle with little clues. While on the second version, the checking process will be done after the player attempts the sequence. This means the sequence will not have a clear start and will have many more combinations and possibilities, making it almost impossible to guess. This version is suitable if you want to create a sequence activation puzzle with clear clue. Okay, so first we are going to create the easier version of the mechanic where the checking process will be done throughout the sequence. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is of course to create the sequence events. So let's create an event right here. Let's name it Torch 1. By the way, for the sequence events on this video, I'm going to be using torches. Of course, it can be anything that you guys want. It can be symbols, it can be statues, it can be anything, so please be creative with it. But on this video, we are going to use torches. Now let's give this event a sprite. We double click on the image, and let's find the torch sprite. I think it's on the other two. Yeah, it's here. As you can see here, we get a full sprite of torches. We got lit torches and unlit torches. Now for the default sprite of the event, we will be using the unlit torch. And for the activated sprite of the event, we will be using the lit torch. So since this is the default page of the event, we will be using the unlit torch sprite. We click OK. And here I will want to turn on the direction fix, because we don't want the torch sprite to change when the player interacts with this event. But of course, this is not mandatory because it depends on the sprite that you're using. So for the sprite, we are going to turn on the direction fix. We click apply and our first page is ready. Okay, so now we will need to create the second page of the event, which will be activated once the puzzle is finished. So let's just create a new event page. And this event page will be activated when cell switch A is turned on. Now for the content of the second page, it can be anything that you want, but for this example, I want it so that once the puzzle is finished, the sequence events will have the lit torches sprite. So I will choose the sprite here, and for the sprite, I will choose the lit torch. And for this, I will turn on the direction fix, and I will also turn on the stepping animation. So there will be a fire animation. We click apply and click OK. And the sequence event is ready. Now, of course, we will need more than one sequence event. You will need at least 3 sequence events to create an event sequence puzzle. So for this video, we are going to be using 4 sequence events. Of course, you can make it as much as you want. Just make sure that you don't confuse your player. So let us copy this torch event. We'll put one here, one here, and the last one here. Now, of course, you can place the sequence events in any formation that you want. The harder it is for the player to predict the sequence, the better. Okay, for this video, our sequence will start on this torch. So this is the first order. The second order will be this torch. The third order will be this torch. And the final order, which is the closing of the sequence, is this torch. Now, I like to number my sequence events based on their order in the sequence. This is a personal preference, but I think it helps a lot. So let's do it. This torch is the first order in the sequence, but the name is already torch 1, so it's already numbered correctly. Now for the second order, which is this torch, we are going to change the name into torch 2. For the third order, which is this torch, we are going to change the name into torch 3. And finally, for the final torch, or the fourth order, we are going to change the name into torch 4. Okay, and now our sequence events are all numbered based on their order in the sequence. Now that our sequence events are ready, let's create the mechanic. We are going to start by eventing the first torch, so let's open its event editor. Now first of all, we will need to create a variable. So let's go to event command, first page, control variables. Now here we will want to create a new variable, and this new variable, we will give it the name sequence activation. Of course, it can be any names that you want, but for this tutorial, we're just going to go by this name. We click apply and the variable is ready. Now this variable is very important because this is the variable that will allow us to track whether or not the player is activating the sequence in the correct order. So it's very important. For now, let's just close all these tabs. Now that we already have the variable, we are going to create the most important part of the mechanic, which is the checking process. The checking process is very important because it's the process that will determine whether or not the player has activated the sequence in order. And for the checking process to know if the player has activated the sequence in order or not, it will check the value of the variable that we just made. That's why we will need to give each sequence event a value. So here, torch 1, which is the first order, will have the value of 1. Torch 2, which is the second order, will have the value of 2. Torch 3, which is the third order, will have the value of 3. And torch 4, which is the fourth and final order, will have the value of 4. And for the checking process to do all those checkings, we will need to create conditional branch. Alright, so let's create a conditional branch. We go to event command, first page, conditional branch. Here we will want to check for variable, and the variable that we will want to check is the variable sequence activation. We click OK, and since torch 1 is the first order of the sequence, then we will check if the value of variable sequence activation is equal to 0 or not. So if it's less or more than 0, that means the player has activated the sequence in the wrong order. For this conditional branch, we will also want to create the else branch. We click OK, and this will be the main conditional branch for the checking process. Now, if the value of the variable sequence activation is indeed 0, which means the condition is true, then we will change the value of this variable into the value of this sequence event, which is 1. To do that, we go to event command, first page, control variables. Now here we will select the variable sequence activation, and we are going to change the value into 1, which is the value of this sequence event. We click OK, and now the value of the variable sequence activation is 1, which means the player has activated the first order in this sequence. Now, I want it so that when the player activated the sequence event, the event will change sprite from an unlit torch into a lit torch. And to do that, we will need to give it a movement route. So let's go to event command, second page, set movement route, and the movement route will be directed to this event. Now, since we have the direction fix on and the lit torch sprite is the down direction of the sprite, we will first need to turn off the direction fix. So here we click on direction fix off, and then after that we will make the event turn down, and I want the fire to be alive, so let's give it a stepping animation. And lastly, let's turn the direction fix on again. We click OK, and let's give it an exit event processing to make it more efficient. So we go to event command, first page, in the flow control you will see exit event processing. Now this is what will happen if the player activates this order correctly. Okay, so we still need to tackle with two situations. The first situation is when the player tries to activate this sequence event when it's already activated. And the second situation is when the player tries to activate this sequence event in an incorrect order. Alright, for the first situation, which is when the player tries to interact with an already activated sequence event, it's actually totally up to you. You can do whatever you want in that situation. You can make the puzzle more strict, so if the player does that, then it will be considered the wrong order and the sequence will fail. But I think this can be a little bit frustrating for the player, so in this example, I'm going to make it so that if the player tries to interact with an already activated sequence event, then nothing will happen. Now, to know if the sequence event has been activated or not is actually very simple. If you see up here, when we activate the sequence event, we will make the event turn down. So all we need to do is to check whether or not the sequence event faces the direction down. To do this, all we need to do is to create a conditional branch. So in the else block here, we will create a conditional branch. We go to event command, first page, conditional branch. Here we will go to the third tab and we'll go to character. The character that we will check is this event because we want to check the direction of this event, and the direction that we want to check is the direction down. We click OK, and this will be our conditional branch. It will check whether or not this event is facing down. If it's facing down, that means this event has been activated. And if this condition is true, then we will just exit event processing, which means nothing will be processed and the processing will be finished. So we can just copy this exit event processing and paste it inside this conditional block. Now that we are finished with the first situation, we are going to tackle the second situation, which is when the player activates the sequence event in an incorrect order. Now this part is the biggest difference between the two versions of event sequence puzzle that we are discussing on this video. In this version, when the player activates the sequence event in an incorrect order, then the sequence will immediately fail and reset. While on the other version, if the player can finish the sequence first and then check if their attempt is right or wrong. In this version, we are going to make it so that when the player activates the sequence event in the wrong order, then the sequence will immediately fail and reset. To reset the sequence, first we will need to reset the value of the variable that controls that sequence itself, which is this variable, the variable sequence activation. We will need to reset the value of the variable sequence activation back to 0. So let's just copy this command and paste it here just after this conditional branch, and here we will want to change the value of the sequence activation into 0. So now the sequence will start all over again from the beginning. Now just with this command we already reset the sequence. However, we also need to reset the sequence events, because as you can see here, when the sequence event got activated, we gave it a certain behavior to show that it's been activated. We want it so that when the sequence gets a reset, then the sequence events will also return to its default unactivated state. Now to do this, we will need to create a movement route. So let's just copy this movement route and put it down here. Now we will edit this movement route. We are going to reset all the sequence events. So we are going to start with torch 1, and here we will just delete the turn down and stepping animation. We can keep the direction fixed controller. Now we will want to reset the sequence events sprite into the unlit torch. So let's make the event turn up, and then we will want to turn off the stepping animation. And that's basically it. We click OK, and this will be the movement route to reset the sequence event. We want to reset all the sequence events, and since we have 4 sequence events, that means we will need 3 other movement routes. So let's just copy this one and paste it 3 times, 1, 2, 3. And now we will assign each this movement route to the other sequence event. This one we will direct to torch 2. This one will be directed to torch 3. And the last one will be directed to torch 4. We will want all these movement routes to be executed at the same time. And to do that, the wait for completion should only be given for the last movement route. For the first 3 movement routes, we can just remove the wait. So we will start with the first movement route. We open the editor and turn off the wait for completion. We do the same for the second movement route and for the third movement route. And now, all these movement routes will be executed at the same time. And of course, to make the process more efficient, let's put an exit event processing here. Let's just copy the command here and put it down here. So this will be the part of the mechanic that resets the sequence when the player activated the sequence event in an incorrect order. We click apply and our sequence event is ready. And now all we need to do is to apply the same logic to the other sequence events. So let's just copy this logic. We close this event editor, and now let's edit the second order or the torch 2. We open its event editor, and here let's just paste the logic. We don't have to change a lot of things here. The first thing that we need to change is of course the conditional value of the variable sequence activation. So let's edit the conditional branch. We change the value from 0 to 1, which is the value of the first order, which means this sequence event can only be activated once the player has activated the first order of the sequence event. So we click OK, and after this, we will change the value of the variable sequence activation into 2, which is the value of this sequence event, which is the second order. So we click OK, and that's it. Click apply, and our second sequence event is ready. And now let's do the same for the third sequence event, which is the third order. Let's just copy the logic. And now let's open the event editor for the third sequence event. Here, let's just paste the logic. And same as before, all we need to change is first the conditional value of the sequence activation. This time, we will change the value from 1 to 2, which means the player should already activate the second order. And if the condition is true, then the value of the sequence activation variable will be changed to 3, which is the value of the third order, indicating that the third order or the third sequence event has already been activated. We click apply and OK. For the fourth sequence event, which is the last order, it's pretty much the same. Let's just copy the logic from the third sequence event. We copy this. And we open the event editor for the fourth sequence event, and let's just paste the logic here. Now, same as before, we need to change the conditional value for the variable sequence activation. So let's edit the conditional branch, and here we will want to change the value from 2 to 3. Now, if this condition is fulfilled, that means the player has successfully attempted the event sequence puzzle. If you create the process of what happened if the player is successful in another event, then you might want to change the value of the variable sequence activation into 4. This way, you can use the value of this variable in the checking process of that event. But if you want to run the process of what will happen when the player is successful with the puzzle inside this event, then you don't need to change the value of the variable, so you can just delete it. Now, in this example, I'm going to create the process for what will happen when the player is successful with the sequence inside this event, in the last sequence event. Now, of course, you can create it the other way. You can create a parallel event and then check for the value of the variable sequence activation. But if the process is not too complex and you can just do it from here, then I recommend you do the eventing here, because it's just going to be more efficient. We will run the process after this movement route here. The first thing that we need to do is to reset the value of the variable sequence activation. So we already have the command here. Let's just copy it and paste it here. Now, the reason why we need to reset the value of this variable back to 0 is so that we can use this variable again for another sequence. After we reset the value of this variable, we want to make sure that the players won't be able to interact with the sequence events anymore. And to do that, we will need to turn on the self-switch A for all the sequence events. Now, there is no event command in RPG Maker to turn on the self-switch of another event, but we can use script call. So this is the script call that we can use to change the value of the self-switch of another event. Here we will need to enter the MapID, the event ID, the self-switch that we want to control, and lastly the action that we want to take, whether we want to set it as true or false. So let's copy this script call, and then in the event editor, let's go to event command, third tab. Here we will make a script, and we'll paste the script call. Now we still need to get the map ID and the event ID, so let's close this for now. Click apply, OK. To get the map ID, click on your map name on the map list and then press spacebar. The map properties window will appear and your map ID will be on the top left corner of the window. As you can see here, the map ID is 12. Now that we get our map ID, let's close this window. Now for the event ID, if you're using RPG Maker MZ, you can look at it in the event list here. But if you're using RPG Maker MV, then you might need to check each one of them. The map ID will be on the top left corner of the event editor's window. So now we are going to return to the event editor of our last sequence event, which is this one. Let's open the event editor. Here we want to edit the script call. First we will enter the map ID. The map ID will be 12. And then the event ID, we will start with torch 1, which is the first order in the sequence. So we write down 1. And then the self switch that we want to control is self switch A. And the action that we want to take is we want to make it true. So this will be the format for the self switch. We click OK. And since there are 4 sequence events, then we need to copy this 3 times. 1, 2, 3. And all we need to do here is to change the event ID. So this will be event ID 2. This will be event ID 3. And this will be event ID 4. We click OK. These script calls are going to make sure that the sequence events will have their second page activated once the player is already finished with the sequence. Now, after these script calls, you can definitely do anything that you want. Maybe you want to make a gate open or a reward show up, or you want to make something happen. It's definitely up to you. For this example, just so that we know that this works, let's just show a text. So let's go to event command, first page, show text. Let's just show the text. You got the sequence right. Click OK, apply, and then click OK again. Now technically our event sequence puzzle is finished, but there is one thing missing here, the clue. Clue is a really broad term when it comes to this kind of puzzle. It can range from very subtle to very clear. This version of event sequence actually works better with subtle clues, since it's easier to guess. But since there are just so many types of clues that you can make, it will be impossible for me to make them in this video. So for both this version and the next version that we are going to talk about, we will use the same clue, which is the clear clue, where interacting with the clues event will show the order of the sequence. Okay, so let's create a clue for our event sequence puzzle. So first we will need to create the clues event. So we will just create it right here. Let's give it a name clue, and let's give it a sprite. For the sprite, we will use the sprite of Crystal. I will want to turn on the stepping animation on, so it has some floating animation, and let's also turn on the direction fix. Then we click apply. Since we are making a clear clue, we want to make sure that the sequence resets every time the player interacts with the clues event. This is to prevent the puzzle from bug and exploits. Since we already created the reset process in the sequence event, we can just copy it. So for now, let's just close this event editor and open the event editor for one of the sequence event. Now we will copy the reset process, which starts from the control variables and ends in the last movement route here. We copy this and we will paste it in the clues event editor right here. Click apply and the reset process is done. Alright, now that we have our reset process, we can start creating the actual clues. But before that, let's create a comment so that it separates between the two processes so it's not confusing. So let's go to event command, first page, comment, and then let's write the comment clue. Okay, our comment is done, and now we can create our clue. For the clue, we are going to show the player the order of the sequence. And to do that, we are going to need to put the sequence events on a temporary activated state. To do that, we will need to create a movement route. So let's just copy this movement route and paste it down here. Okay, so let's edit the movement route, and this movement route will be directed to the first order of the sequence, which is the torch 1. Now this movement route is already the move route for the sequence event to return to its default state. So it's already halfway done. All we need to do is to add a temporary activated state. So after this direction fix off, we will make the event turn down, and then we will turn on the stepping animation. So this will be the temporary activated state. Now before it resets to its default state, we are going to give it a wait. Let's give it a wait for 30 frames, and that's basically it. Make sure that you check the wait for completion and click OK. This will be the movement route for the clue. So now all we need to do is to create the movement routes for the other sequence events. So let's copy this 3 times, 1, 2, 3, And now we will structure it based on the order of the sequence. So the second movement route will be for the second order, which is the torch 2. The third movement route will be for the third order, which is torch 3. And the final movement route will be for the final order, which is the torch 4. We click OK, and our clue is finished. This will be the clue, and let's add an exit event processing. Go to event command, first page, exit event processing, and that's basically it. Click apply, OK, and our clue is finished. Now, one last thing before we are finished is to make sure that the player won't be able to interact with the clues event again after the sequence is finished. So let's open the clues event editor, and let's just copy this event page. Now, in the second event page, we will just delete all this. And this second page, same as before, will be activated when SelfSwitch A is turned on. We click apply and OK. And now in the event editor of the last sequence event, we open it. We will add another script call to set the SelfSwitch value of another event. Now this one, we will set it to the ID of the close event, which is EventId 5. We click OK, apply, and OK, that's basically it. And now we are going to test it. Okay, so now we are in the game and we're going to test the sequence activation puzzle. We'll start by interacting with our clues event. And as you can see, it gives us the clue for the sequence activation puzzle by showing us the order of the sequence. So it will start here, this is the first order, and this will be the second order, this is the third order, and this will be the final and the fourth order. This version of sequence activation puzzle has a clear start. So as you see here, if we try to interact with the other sequence events that are not the first order, it won't activate. So we need to activate from this event, which is the first order of the sequence. So now let's try to interact with this sequence event, and as you can see, it's activated because this is the first order. Now the player is supposed to activate the second order, which is this event. But if the player activates the wrong order, for example, the player activates this one, which is the final order, as you can see, the sequence immediately resets. Okay, so let's try to do it again. First, we are going to activate the first order, and then we are going to activate the second order. And as you can see, so far it's been going well. And now, if the player gets the wrong order, for example, the player activates this one, same as before, the sequence will immediately reset. Let's try again. First, we are going to activate the first order, then we are going to activate the second order, and this time, let's see why the reset process in the clues event is important. So let's say the player gets into a situation like this, where they're halfway through the sequence and they forget what the next order is, so they want to check on the clue again. So when they interact with the clues event, it will show the clue, but it will also reset the sequence. This will prevent the puzzle from bugging and also prevents the player from doing an exploit plays. Let's try again. This time, let's try to get it right. So we are going to activate the first order, then the second order, the third order, and finally the fourth and final order. And as you can see, we get our text, you get the sequence right, which means we have successfully finished the sequence. And if I try to interact with the sequence events again, as you can see, nothing happens because the SelfSwitch A of this sequence event has been turned on. Same with the clues event. If I try to interact it, nothing happens. So yeah, that means our first version of the sequence activation puzzle worked. Now let's get into the second version. Okay, so now we are going to create the second version of the sequence activation mechanic. The main difference between the first version that we just made with this version that we are going to make is mainly on how it handles the incorrect order. So in the first version, when the player interacts the sequence event in an incorrect order, the sequence will immediately reset. But on this version, when the player interacts with the sequence event in incorrect order, then the sequence will go on, which means the player can first attempt the whole sequence, and then at the end of the sequence, the player can check whether or not their attempt is right or wrong. Creating the second version is actually a lot easier than creating the first version, mainly because you don't have to reset the sequence events throughout the sequence, only at the end of the sequence. Which means in the sequence event here, in the reset process, all we need to reset is the value of the variable sequence activation. We don't need to reset the sequence event, so we can just get rid of all these movement routes. So let's delete it. Now, in this version, we want to make sure so that even when the player attempts the sequence in the wrong order, the sequence event will still be activated when the player interacts with them. To do that, we will just copy this movement route to activate the event and put it down here. This will make it so that the event will still be activated even when the player interacts with it in the wrong order. And now all we need to do is to apply the same logic to the other sequence events. So let's close this, we click OK, and now let's move on to the sequence event for the second order, which is this one. We open the event editor. Now here, let's just delete all the movement routes in the reset process, and we copy the activated movement route here and put it down here. We click apply and OK. Now we go to the third sequence event for the third order. We open the event editor. Now in here, same as before, we delete all the movement routes on the reset process, and we copy the movement route to activate the event and put it down here. We click apply and OK. Now we will move on to the sequence event of the last order, which is this one. Let's open the event editor. In the previous version, we can run the process of what will happen when the player is successful with the sequence inside the sequence event of the last order, like in this event. But in this version, we cannot do that. We will need to run that process in another event, which means we should give the sequence event a value, just like any other sequence event. The value of the sequence event, because it is in the fourth order, is 4. So before this movement route, we'll need to change the value of the variable sequence activation. Let's just copy this command and put it here. Now we will change the value of the variable sequence activation to 4, which is the value of this sequence event. We click OK, and we will move all this process into the new event, but first we need to create that event first. But before that, let's edit the reset process of this event. So let's delete all these movement routes, and let's copy the movement route to activate the event and put it here. We click apply and OK. Okay, so now let's create an event to check the player's attempt on the sequence. Let's create an event here. Let's call it checker. And for the sprite, I'm going to choose the sprite of this woman. By the way, again, this can be anything that you want. Please be creative with it. It can be a switch, it can be a button, it can literally be anything. This is just for example. In this event, we are going to check the value of the variable sequence activation. If that variable has the value of the last order of the sequence, which in this example is 4, that means the player has successfully attempted the sequence. But anything other than that means the player has attempted the sequence in an incorrect way. To do that, we will need to create a conditional branch. So let's go to event command, first page, conditional branch. Here we will want to check for variable, and the variable that we want to check is of course the variable sequence activation. So let's select it, and here we want to check whether or not the value of the variable sequence activation is equals to 4, which is the value of the last order in this sequence. And now don't forget to make an else branch for this conditional branch. And we click OK, and this will be the format for the conditional branch. Here, if the condition is fulfilled, we are going to run the successful process, but if the condition is not fulfilled, then we are going to run the reset process. We already created both the successful process and the reset process, so let's just copy and paste them. So for now, let's just click apply, and we close this event editor, we click OK. First, let's copy the successful process. It's on the sequence event of the last order, this one. Let's open the event editor. Now, this is the successful process. Let's just cut it. Click apply. OK. Now let's return to our checkers event. Now here we want to paste it on this block. So if the condition is fulfilled, then we'll execute this process. Click apply. OK. And now let's copy the reset process. The reset process is still in our clues event. So let's just copy it from here. This is the reset process. Let's just copy it. Click OK, and let's return to our checkers event, and we will paste it in the else block. So now we got the processes for both condition. If the condition is fulfilled, it's going to run this process, which is the successful process, and if the condition is not fulfilled, then it's going to run the reset process. Let's give these two processes an exit event processing. We go to event command, first page, exit event processing, and let's just copy this one and paste it here. Click apply, and we are basically done. Our checkers event is now finished, and now we can test it out. Okay, we are in the game, and we are going to test the second version of the sequence activation mechanic. To start this puzzle, let's interact with the clues event, and same as before, it will show us the order of the sequence. Different from the previous version, this version allows us to start the sequence from any event sequence. This leads to a lot more combinations and possibilities. It's almost impossible to guess the order of the sequence on this version. For example, let's say that we don't know the first order of the sequence, so we go with this one. Then for the second order, we go with this one. The third order, we go with this one. And last, we go with this one. Now, if we check our attempt on the checkers event, as you can see, it runs the reset process. Why? Because we didn't activate the sequence on the correct order. Now, let's try again. Maybe we were just unlucky. This time, let's try this as the first order, then this as the second order, this as the third order, and finally, this is the last order. Now, if we check again, oh, it's still wrong. Why? Because, well, we didn't activate the sequence in the correct order. This time, let's check the clues event. So, based on the clues event, the correct order will be this one. Then we go here, here, and here. Now, if we check our attempt on the checkers event, as you can see, we got the sequence right. As you can see, if we activated the sequence correctly, then it will run the successful process. As you see here too, we can no longer interact with the sequence events, and we can also no longer interact with our clues event. So yeah, the second version worked. As you can see, it works differently from the first version. If you create a sequence activation puzzle with this version, then I recommend you use the clear clue, since there are just way too many combinations, especially if you have a lot of sequence events. If you do want to use a subtle clue, make sure that the player will be able to figure it out and not frustrated. Now that we have learned how to make the mechanic and created two basic versions of the mechanic, let's try to create a simple proper puzzle with the sequence activation mechanic. The idea for the simple puzzle is that once the player has successfully activated the sequence, a chest will appear. Okay, so first we need to create our chest event. So we will create it here. We will create it using the quick event creation. So do a right click and then quick event creation, and here we will create our treasure event. Let's just say that we will get 100 gold. Click OK, and our chest event is created. We still need to do some edits on the chest event, so let's open its event editor. Now here we want to make a copy of this event page, so let's copy event page and paste it. Now we got the second page that has the same eventing as the first page. For the first page, we will make a blank page on it, so let's just click on the clear event page, so it becomes a blank page. And for the second page, we will make it so that it will be activated when cell switch A is turned on. Now we go to the third page, and in the third page, we will change the condition from cell switch A to cell switch B. We return to the second page, and here we change the control cell switch command from A to B. Click OK, apply, and let's just click OK, and our chest event is ready. So we are going to use the second version of the sequence activation mechanic, so there is really nothing much to change. But there are definitely details that we can add to enhance this mechanic. The first and most important detail that we need to add is the sound effects. So far the mechanic has been really silent, so let's give it a sound effect. First, let's create a sound effect for when the sequence event got activated. So let's open the event editor for one of our sequence event, this one. Now we are going to edit the movement route that activates the sequence event. Before we turn down, let's give a sound effect. We do a play SA. And since the activated state of the sequence event is a lit torch, then let's give it the fire sound effect. So we go to F, here, fire 1. This is good. Let's turn down the volume. Okay, perfect. Click OK. And let's copy this movement route. Click OK. And now all we need to do is just to copy this sound effect to the other movement route where the sequence events got activated. Don't forget that we also temporarily activates the sequence events when showing the clue. So let's give it the sound effect too. We open the clues event editor, and here during the clue, we'll play the sound effect. Paste it here, here, and here. Click apply. Now that we gave sound effect to when the sequence event got activated, we also need to give sound effect to when the sequence event returns with default state or gets a reset. So let's go to the reset process, and since all the movement routes on the reset process are executed together, then we only need to add the sound effect on one of the movement route. So let's just add the sound effect on the last movement route here for torch 4. We edit it, and before we turn up, let's do a play SA. And since the torch will be extinguished when the sequence event get a reset, then we will give it the water sound effect. So this maybe, yeah, I think this is perfect. Let's just turn down the volume. Okay, click OK and copy the movement route. Don't forget that we also reset the sequence event when we show the clue. So we will add another sound effect on the movement route of the clue. We'll start with the torch 1. We edit the movement route, and the reset sound effect will play here, just before the turn up. We'll do the same for the others. Torch 3 and torch 4. And now we are done adding sound effects on the processes on this event. Click apply and OK. We still need to add the sound effect for the reset process in the checkers event. So let's open its event editor, and same as before, in the reset process, we will add the sound effect at the very last movement route. So we edit it, and just before the turn up, we will paste the movement route sound effect. Click OK, apply, and OK again. Another detail we can add is to change the sprite of the crystal when the clue is going on. It's just a visual way of telling that the clues event is currently working. To do that, we need to open the clues event editor. Here, at the very beginning of the process, we need to make a movement route for this event. So let's go to event commands, second page, set movement route. The movement route will be directed to this event. And here, I want to change the direction of the sprite, so it will change sprite. But since we have direction fix on, we need to turn it off first. So let's go with direction fix off. And then after this, maybe we can give it a sound effect first. So let's do play SA. Maybe we do magic. I think this one is good. Maybe make the pitch higher and volume lower. Okay, and then I will make it so that it turns left, so it changes the sprite, and I will turn back the direction fix. Click OK, and copy this movement route, and at the very end of the process, just before the exit event processing, we are going to paste this movement route again. Now this time, we are going to return it to its default direction, which is turn down. Click OK, apply, and it's done. We can close it. Now that we are done with the details, we can move on to finish the puzzle. So as you remember here, our chest event won't appear unless the cell switch A of its event is turned on. Now we want it so that the cell switch A of the chest event will be turned on if the player has successfully activated the sequence event. Now this means we need to turn on the cell switch A in the successful process, which is located in the checkers event. So let's open the checkers event, and in here, maybe after the text, we will set the cell switch A of the chest event to be turned on. So let's just copy this script call, and then we put it after the text. Now here, we are going to edit the script call, and we are going to change the event ID from 5 to the event ID of the chest event, which we can see here is the event ID 7. So let's change it to 7. We click OK. And for decoration, let's give the chest an animation before it appears. So let's go to event command, second page, show animation. Now the character will be treasure, which is our chest event, and the animation that will be played, let's see, let's use this animation. We click OK, and we don't have to check the wait for completion. Just click OK. And here, before the chest appears, we are going to give it a wait. So we go to event command, in the second page there is a wait. Let's give it a 15 frames wait. And that's it. Click apply, OK, and our puzzle is ready. So now let's test it out. Okay, so now we are already in the game, and we are going to test the simple puzzle that we created using this sequence activation mechanic. As you see here, the chest hasn't appeared yet, because for it to appear, we need to successfully activate the sequence in order. So let's try this. First, we interact with our clues event. As you can see, we got our clue. For the first try, let's do an incorrect sequence. So let's start with this one, then this one. Let's see how our attempts goes. As you can see, it resets. Why? Because the sequence that we did last time was an incorrect sequence. So this time, let's do the correct sequence. Let's start here, then go to the second order, the third order, and the fourth order. Now, if we check our attempt, as you see, we got the sequence right. And then, the animation appears and our chest also appears. We got 100 gold. So yeah, that's an example of a simple puzzle created with sequence activation mechanic. This is just a simple example. This mechanic is very powerful and versatile. There are so many versions of it that you can explore. It's good as a component of a big puzzle or as a standalone puzzle itself. Overall, a very cool mechanic, so be creative with it. So yeah, that's the video on how to create the sequence activation mechanic in RPG Maker. I hope this video helps. If you encounter any problems or any errors when trying to create this mechanic, then please don't hesitate to ask me in the comment section below. I will try my best to help. See you in the next video, goodbye and God bless.